G'day ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Draw with Jazza. I'm Jazza and this is a video tutorial on how to animate a walk cycle using the tweening method. Now the difference between frame by frame animation and tweening is that frame by frame, as the name implies, involves redrawing every individual frame as you create the movement. Tweening is where you create different parts of the thing that will move, namely a person in this case, and then you move those parts through a tween, which is moving it from one place to another. Now we're going to be animating this guy, who we shall refer to as Noodle Man, because he looks like a noodle. So we're going to get straight into it and get to work. Now I've already done the video and frame by frame animation, and just so you can be clear on how that works, this was the final outcome of that tutorial. So as you can see, there's a lot more dynamic control of movement, but it is a little choppy. And so tweening animation is very useful when we want to make something that looks very smooth. So what I want to do is, just as a reference to begin with, I'm going to animate this guy side by side, like right next to the first animation we did, just to show the difference. I'm going to lock both these layers, and we begin by making the parts of this person, or of this, whatever you would call him. Okay. So I'll zoom in a bit. Now it's important when you approach this to understand that everything has its own layer, and whichever is at the top is at the foremost of the composition. So we will, in this case, very likely have this arm at the very top of the layer range, and the back arm and the back leg will be behind. So I'm just going to go in and draw this part here. Just this part of the arm. Now I will take that, press F8. Actually, here's a little trick, right? If I select that, you can see that the box is around it like this. But if I turn that so it's upways, then I select it, so we have a proper vertical box. Press F8 to convert to symbol. Ignore all that stuff. We're going to make this a graphic. We're going to call it Noodle Man, and I'll copy that so I can paste it later. Oh wait, no. Hand front. You don't have to give them specific names, but for organization it is a wise thing to do. Now I can just angle it back. Now sorry, I should pace myself. This little dot in the middle, when you convert it to a graphic, is the anchor point. So when that's in the middle and you turn, it turns there. But you know it's an arm and it turns at the elbow. So clearly that is where the anchor point should be. At the frame underneath that, I'm going to... Oh, sorry, I should go inside this clip and make sure it's colored in so it appears on top of the other layers. So I'm just going to color it in white. I know you can't see it, but you will later. Now I'm going to draw the upper arm now. I've just clicked to make it a wireframe so that I can see what I'm drawing underneath it. I just want to make sure that the lines are smooth. Now the good thing about tween animation is that your images, you can spend more time refining the parts of what you're animating because it uses them the whole time. You don't have to be redrawing everything all the time. I'm getting a little too nitpicky now. So I'm coloring that in, selecting this. Oops, not that, just this. And same trick, I'll turn it up straight and reselect it. You see that box is completely different now. It's changed to be much thinner. Press F8. Noodle Man arm front. And move that anchor point up on the shoulder. So that's his front arm done. I'm gonna add a few layers. I should probably pull this down. All right, now I'm going to do the torso. So in the same sort of purpose-driven pose, this is what his torso and hip look like. I'll color that in. Convert to symbol. Noodle man. Torso. Now I like to put the anchor point at the hip because that's where people turn. A layer on top of that for the head. So quite simply, I'm just creating all the little parts for this right now. The head's done. Convert to symbol. Noodle man head. Anchor point at the neck. So that's where his head turns. I should just go in here and tilt it a bit. I'm not too happy with that angle. I'll pull it back. Okay. So we're getting there. I'll go underneath the head layer, but I'll add 3 layers here on top of the torso layer. So we have 1 for the upper leg. And we color that in. Same thing, select it, turn it straight. Convert to simple, noodle man up leg. Move the anchor point to the hip. And the layer on top of that is going to be the low leg. So exactly the same thing. Turn it up, select noodle man low leg. So I'll turn anchor point, getting there slowly. Okay. Now, for those who have seen the frame by frame animation tutorial, you will notice that when I finish this animation, that the movement will be smoother, but it will be more rigid. So the feet won't be flopping like in the other one, which is kind of a cool effect for a very floppy character. So noodle man foot. Oh, I did something wrong. See how I converted it to symbol on that angle? But that's fine. I'll just go inside, turn it flat. So it's like that. Then I can go back outside and turn it back again. Cool. So I've finished the leg. Now, a little cheat is I can just grab these 3 layers, which have this leg selected, press Control-Alt-C, or you could right-click, and I don't even use this one. Which is it? Copy frames. I think it. Copy frames. Yes. Then I go underneath the torso. Make sure I have 3 layers selected. 3 frames on 3 layers. Paste frames, or Control-Alt-V if you prefer the shortcut. Make sure it fills up the whole width of the timeline. So now if I drag this across, I can just reposition this to be on the back. Now because it's further behind, we want to shrink it so it looks further back. Okay, now the very last thing is to add 2 more layers. 1 for the forearm and hand. And turn. Convert to symbol, noodle man, backhand, turn back, anchor point, And finally, the arm underneath. Now when I draw the limb underneath, like the top one has an open bit. You notice that I left a white space, but the one underneath is always finishes the line. That's to enable it so that when the top one turns or whatever, it still looks connected, and the back one has that line that continues and it looks like it joins with it. So same thing, Noodle Man, back arm, and he is ready to animate. So I will get rid of my reference picture. Okay. So as you can see, it's fairly similar. You know, there are differences. It's slightly less fluid. We don't have the bend in that foot. You know, and if we wanted to be really tricky, we could divide the foot into two parts. But, you know, we don't really want to bother doing that right now. So we're going to make sure that the first frame and last frame, so frame 40, all of those layers connected to that person have a keyframe on the first frame and the last frame. At frame 20, I'm going to go in, make a new keyframe, and we're just going to reposition the whole body of this guy in the opposite angle, in the other extreme of the walk cycle. So we take his limbs, his arms, reposition them, and it's quite easy in the sense that, you know, all the parts are pulled apart for you. Now, like I did in the other video, I'm going to draw two reference lines for myself. One for the front and one for the back. So I'm going to guide these legs to follow those lines just to make sure that it's absolutely consistent. So I'm going to lock all that, go back to frame 20, and now when I pull this leg back for him walking, his leg goes behind into the position of the other leg. I just make sure it follows that line. And I can bring this one forward. Make it straight. Okay, that looks about right. So this is where it starts to pick up. I'm going to just make sure I have each of the frames on either side of this selected, right click and go create motion tween. So now when I watch this, you can see the movement begins, but as you can very well see, it's crap. But we just get the motion going so that we can start adding the details. So we add a keyframe in at frame 10. So we select them all and press F6. And now we reposition. And I'll do the same thing for frame 30. So I'll work on both of them at once. So I'm going to take all of frame 10, press Control A on frame 10, drag him down, because as you can see in the reference over here, he bops down halfway. So we want to make sure that we mimic that, because that's part of the strut. Okay. Now we make it look less retarded by repositioning the limbs. Okay. I want to make sure the feet look all right. So this front leg is going to be bent. I'll pull that in, make sure the foot follows that line. I can do the back leg. I'm just going to pull it out so I can see it properly as I add it. So he's lifting his leg and bringing it forward. So that's already starting to look better. but you can see that, you know, the elbow disconnects here and little things like that. So now we do the same thing on frame 30. So we start with the arm. Make sure the hand is in place. This time, this foot is coming forward. So we will make sure that the foot isn't solid on the ground. The back leg into position, and that one is solid on the ground, so make it completely flat. Now if you watch that, so we're getting there. Okay, now we can go halfway between these and fix the nitty-gritties. So we drag that arm there. So things like this leg, the bits that poke out. So we just added that halfway point. Pull that foot back down. So his foot lowers as he's going forward. Okay, so we have another halfway point we need to add here. F6. Make sure that this foot is still flat all the way there. Okay. This one can start to kick forward a bit. And this needs to be connected to the elbow. So we're getting there. 2 more halfway points. And fixing up all the little nitty-gritties. Making sure that this one is firmly on the ground. Now for anyone who has seen the other frame-by-frame tutorial, let me just add a frame here and do the same thing. You will notice already how much faster this happens. And while both have their uses, the tween method is generally much more useful for creating flash games as well, in the sense that you can create several frames on the or inside of each clip. So for instance, I could go inside this head and make heaps of different frames for different head types or accessories or hats or whatever, and then in a game we could code it so that they do different things. But in terms of animation itself, frame by frame is definitely the more powerful method in terms of conveying attitude and flow if done correctly. But it is also the most time consuming and difficult to do properly. Okay, so we've got our movement happening. Now we can just kind of add our little bits of flair. So if we watch this, it looks all right, but it doesn't have the right sort of bounce. The head's stiff. It's all moving at the same pace. So I want to go in here and make the head dip down. So it starts to dip in and then it'll come back up. So I'll get halfway. So if I watch that, he dips down and then I'll do the same thing. A little bit, a little bit, a little bit. And now when we watch it, so just that little movement in the head, that's that little bit of character. Oops. So if I go back to the main flash and render by hitting Control Enter, you can see the difference there. So the frame by frame, you can definitely see that there are less frames. This one, the tweened one, is far smoother, but you know, there is more control there. You know, it has more style. You can see that the arm moves around as it comes over, you know. So yeah, I think there's only a couple of other things that we could do to just make this work a bit more. First things first, the very last frame, I know that we began with it being exactly the same frame as the first frame, but now that we've got our movement in, we don't want that, because that means there's 2 frames that are exactly the same. So we just go to the frame before the very last frame. select all of them, hit F6 and drag it across. So now that last frame and the first frame are different, it won't have that little pause. Okay. So we save. Now, there's a few other things that we can do, and this, what I'm going to be doing now is called easing. So I select the area within these first set of tweens. I go to our properties bar, and I want to ease it in. So let's go -30. Now what easing does, if I was to move this pen over here without any easing, it would be moving at a constant rate. Easing it in means it begins slower and then speeds up. Easing it out means it begins faster and then slows down. So adding an ease in to that means that he begins slower and gets into the walk. And then I want to ease out around here. So I select all those. I want to ease out, let's say, 40, that's fine. And we'll do the same thing for the second half. So ease in 30, ease out 40. It's a very subtle, small thing, but it just helps add motion. Helps add a little bit of flow. And finally, I'll just go in and delete my reference lines. Back to the main timeline. And make a new thing. And just, oops, I shouldn't have deleted that, should I? I'm going to duplicate this. Delete the reference. And put him in the middle. So now we have, oops, that doesn't work, does it? Give me a second. There we go. We have our final production. So it took, far less than half the amount of time that the other animation took, the frame by frame one. You can see that there are flaws to it. It's not perfect. And there are methods that you could use to really refine a tweened walk cycle or animation. Like I said, halving the foot, or adding an upper torso and a hip and lower torso part separate, so you can have hip movement in there, and just really spending your time refining it. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I think that this will do. So I hope that you've been able to learn something from this in terms of layering and creating and moving a simple tweened animated walk cycle. Thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed this video. Links are below to download the original files for reference. Remember, if you animate or draw something cool, be sure to share it on Newgrounds.com, the internet's best source for animations, games, art and music. Until next time, see you later.